The Lion and the Loom. Chapter 1. The Sky That Would Not Move. There was a time before the dreaming, before the first thread twisted in the mind of a child, before the clocks sighed and stopped, before the stars remembered how to wander. The sky was still then, not peaceful still, like glass, like law. It arched above the waking lands in a perfect curve, pale and exact, without ripple or shimmer. It was said to have been poured, not born, cast from light itself when the world was first measured into place. The people lived by the clock and the rulebook. They did not imagine. They did not wonder. They did not ask what if. Their days began when the sun clicked into place behind the eastern ridge and ended precisely 12 ticks after noon. Their speech was plain, their thoughts accounted for. Emotion was a tool, not a tide. Children were taught to build, not play. Elders were praised for forgetting the unnecessary. They buried their dead in geometric fields and marked the silence above them with stones, etched in coordinates. There were no dreams. There were only nights, but in the far north, beyond the frozen parallels and the last sanctioned outpost, the world grew soft. The snow fell unevenly there, piling into swirls. The trees leaned in strange directions, as if listening. And among them, older than all order, was the lion. No one remembered where it had come from. It had no origin file, no census record. It was not listed in the waking lexicon. And yet it was known. It was enormous, golden, unblinking. Its mane shimmered like cracked wheat in the wind. Its breath moved like story. It watches the borderlands, whispered the scavengers, between waking and whatever came before. But no one went to the lion, except the child whose name had not yet found them, was born beneath the unmoving sky, but carried a slant in their gaze, a shimmer, a softness, a subtle way of seeing that made the elders frown and the teachers stutter. They found spirals and puddles. They heard humming in the wind. They sometimes spoke backwards when no one was looking. The child was afraid of forgetting, though they didn't know what they feared losing. They wandered into the Northwood on a gray morning, barefoot and unaccounted for, drawn by something they did not yet have the word to name. That's where they met the lion. It did not speak, not in the way of mouths, but it looked at them, and they knew that something had been lost, long before it had ever been found. That night, for the first time in recorded time, the stars moved, just slightly, a shimmer, a breath, a twitch in the corner of the sky. The clocks ticked a fraction slower. Some people gasped, some wept, some pretended not to notice. But in the north, the lion stood, and the child, curled at its paws, dreamed. And for the first time in the world's long silence, a thread began to turn. The Lion and the Loom. Chapter 2. The Place Without a Name. The child did not return home. Not fully. Not in the way they were expected to. Their body reappeared on the scans. Their footsteps were logged. They answered questions with acceptable words. But something had unraveled behind their eyes, and something new had begun to spiral in its place. Each dusk, when the outer lights dimmed and the rest units clicked into sequence, the child slipped beyond the sanctioned grid lines and wandered north. They walked beneath an indifferent sky. They crossed the hush of the tree line and found the clearing, where the lion waited, unmoving, unmoved, and yet somehow impossibly alive. They never spoke aloud. Speech felt brittle in that place, but the silence between them had shaped. The lion's gaze wrapped around the child, like a memory one the world had tried to forget. For 12 nights they met. The child brought pebbles with spirals etched into them. The lion brought nothing, but every time it exhaled, the wind seemed to form a pattern in the grass. Circles within circles. Unnamed glyphs. The child followed them with trembling fingers. One night the lion blinked. Just once. And in that blink, the sky above the clearing cracked. Not visibly, not yet. But the child felt it. A loosening, a question. A breath where once there had only been command. Why do I feel like I've been here before? The child whispered inside themselves. Why do I miss something I've never known? The lion stood and turned toward the farthest edge of the woods. The child followed. They came to a clearing where the air shimmered, even though no heat moved. The ground was soft, as if it remembered being touched. At the center of this place stood a stone, ancient, cracked, wrapped in moss and silence, and tied around the stone, impossibly fine, was a single thread. It pulsed faintly. Alive, unseen by anyone who had forgotten how to see. The lion bowed its head to the stone, and the child, as if moved by instinct older than body, placed one hand upon the thread. It shivered, and so did the world. Elsewhere, far away, someone dropped a cup and did not know why. A teacher forgot the lesson plan. A dog howled without reason. A maintenance algorithm collapsed into poetry. The world did not notice, but the dreaming had begun.
Chapter 3. The Mouth Beneath Silence. By the 13th night, the clearing no longer felt still. It pulsed gently, almost imperceptibly, with something that had no name in the waking tongue. The thread around the old stone flickered, dim as a candle in a well. The child sat beside the lion, knees drawn to chest, palms pressed to the damp earth. They no longer brought questions. They brought listening. The lion began to speak, not with words, as the waking world had no alphabet wide enough, but with memory, scent, symbol, and silence. The first story. The lion raised one paw and drew a spiral in the dirt. The child recognized it immediately, even though they did not know from where. The shape felt older than the world, like it had always been beneath the floorboards of their mind. Then the lion pressed its nose into the center of the spiral, and the world fell inward. The forest dissolved, or perhaps it bloomed into something larger, wilder, more luminous. The air thickened with gold. Voices hummed at the edge of hearing. Trees bent toward unseen winds. They stood at the edge of a vast, circular chamber, roofed by a mirror that showed not reflection, but remembrance. In the center of the chamber spun a great loom, even though it had no weaver. Threads hung from the sky like rain. Each one hummed with story, not fact, but meaning. The child turned to the lion, wide-eyed, and from somewhere beneath the lion's silence came the first shape of understanding. Before the dreaming, there was the loom. Before order, there was pattern. The world was not made of matter, but of memory. The child stepped toward the loom and the room flickered. Just before it vanished, they saw their own reflection on the mirrored ceiling. But it wasn't them. Not quite. They snapped back into the clearing. The spiral was gone, but the taste of it remained on their tongue. Ash, honey, sky. The lion turned its great head and looked east. Far beyond the forest, something had begun to fall out of place. The waking world was cracking at the seams. But here, in the borderlands, a child had glimpsed the old lore, and the lion, once only a watcher, had spoken. That night, the child did not sleep, but they dreamed anyway.
The Lion and the Loom. Chapter 4. The Weaver Who Was Not Born. On the 14th night, the wind changed. It carried weight, not air, but memory, heavy as rain that never fell. The lion rose without a sound and began to walk, but not toward the stone or the spiral, but deeper into the woods, into the parts that bent the air and thickened thought. The child followed without fear. They passed trees that bent in bowing arcs, roots that moved when not looked at, stones etched in languages that never had a mouth. The lion stopped at a hollow in the earth, a natural bowl ringed by whispering ferns. The sky above was thinner here, almost worn. The lion stepped into the center, lowered its head and breathed once. A ripple moved through the ground. Then it began to speak. The second story. Before waking, before sleep, before the dreaming, there was the weaver. The lion closed its eyes, and the ground opened, not physically, but within. The child saw not with eyes, but with knowing. A figure moved through shadow and thread. Neither man nor woman, neither beast nor god. A shimmer, a shape, a rhythm woven into light. The weaver was not born. It rose when the world first asked why. Where there was chaos, the weaver did not make order, but pattern. Echoes, recurrence, rhythm. It did not speak, it sang. Each note spun a thread. Each thread became a strand of the loom. And from that loom, the world unfolded. But the weaver was not alone. From the edges of unpatterned silence came the forgetting. A force with no face, no name, only hunger. It whispered, unweave. And slowly, thread by thread, it began to pull. The child gasped. They could feel it. The pull in their bones. The ache of unraveling that still echoed in the waking world. The lion's voice hummed like a heartbeat beneath thunder. The weaver did not fight. It scattered itself into the threads. Memory into matter, rhythm into root, spiral into sky. And then, it was gone. But not lost. For wherever a dream was dreamt, wherever a spiral turned, wherever a child looked at the world and asked, why not? The weaver stirred, not to return, but to be remembered. The vision faded. The hollow remained. The child sat in silence beside the lion. They did not speak. They did not move. But inside them, something stirred. A shimmer, a song, the shape of a thread waiting to be pulled. The Lion and the Loom. Chapter 5. The Clockmakers and the Wound of Time. On the 15th night, the lion brought the child to the base of a shattered stone tower. It stood crooked in a grove that time had long since stopped visiting. Ivy crept across gears. Broken sun discs leaned against the roots. Something ancient and mechanical pulsed beneath the earth. Slow, metallic, forgotten. The lion's breath clouded the air, though the night was not cold. The child reached out and touched the stone. The tower remembered. The third story. When the weaver scattered, the lion intoned. The loom began to fray. Without rhythm to hold them, the people faltered. The world unspooled, colors blurred, directions warped, meanings drifted like leaves. The stars wept and the ground pulsed with images no one had asked for. In the chaos, a faction emerged, minds sharp as obsidian, hearts sealed in glass. They called themselves the Clockmakers. We will carve time into shape, they said. We will bind the world to measurement. We will silence the spirals. They built towers of brass and stone. They harvested echo from the loom's dying strands. They locked each hour in a box and chained the sky to its hinges. They crafted the first clock. It beat not with rhythm, but command. It did not hum. It ticked, and the world obeyed. The land straightened. The air cooled. The dreams fled underground. The people learned to speak in units. They forgot the weaver. They feared the spiral. But nothing built in forgetting lasts forever. For deep in the heart of the first clock, buried between the gears, was a thread the clockmakers could not remove. It pulsed faint, ancient, defiant. A single spiral-shaped hair from the weaver's mane. They sealed it in silence. But silence, like time, eventually breaks. The child blinked. The tower cracked just slightly. A puff of dust slipped from a seam in the stone. Beneath it, a gear shifted out of time. The lion growled, not in anger, but recognition. The clocks will break. And when they do, the spiral will return. That night, the child slept beneath the tower's leaning shadow. They dreamed of brass forests and bleeding gears. Of voices caught between ticks. Of a city that no longer knew it was dreaming. And in the center of it all, they saw their own hands, turning, threading, beginning. The Lion and the Loom. Chapter 6. The Spiral City. The child woke beneath the leaning tower. But their breath carried the scent of smoke and salt. The lion's gaze held them steady. As the world melted and reformed around their closed eyes, they stood at the edge of a city built in spirals. Not on grids or straight lines, but in swirling pathways that curled like fingers of smoke. The air was thick with song. a humming pulse woven into the stone, echoing the weaver's forgotten rhythm. Towers stretched like spiraled seashells, their walls alive with flickering runes, casting shadows that danced like stories waiting to be told. The streets twisted inward, folding like the threads of a loom, leading always back to the center, where a vast glowing orb floated, suspended by shimmering threads. The child stepped forward, feeling the city breathe beneath their feet. The orb pulsed with light. It was the heart of the spiral, the source of all stories, all memory, all dreaming. But the city was fractured. Cracks of silence ran like scars through the glowing stone. Fragments of the clockmaker's order had reached here too. Steel gates clamped tight across alleys, voices trapped behind walls of ticking glass. At the city's edge, the child saw shadows, figures bound by numbers, by time, walking in circles, never touching, never breaking pattern. They whispered names long forgotten, words without meaning, and never looked up. The lion stepped beside the child, its great paw tracing the spiral's curve. Without speaking, it showed the child the deepest truth. The spiral city is a place of becoming, of falling apart and weaving anew. It holds the memory of the weaver, but is trapped by the clockmaker's grasp. The child reached toward the orb. They felt the threads hum beneath their fingertips, alive with possibility, the power to unweave or remake. The lion's eyes glimmered like stars, and the child understood. The spiral city was both prison and promise. They awoke back beneath the tower. The dawn touched the stone, and the thread beneath the lion's paw pulsed gently. The Lion and the Loom. Chapter 7. Echoes through the spiral. The child stepped carefully into the spiral city again, this time with eyes open, senses sharpened by the lion's steady presence. The air was thick with the hum of stories, threads of light that wove through the alleys like restless. The city sang, not with music, but with murmurs and echoes. The walls themselves whispered fragments of lost dreams, snatches of forgotten songs, and half-remembered names. The child wandered past houses shaped like coiled shells, their doors carved with spirals that seemed to breathe. Windows flickered with images, memories replayed and folded back on themselves, like reflections in a cracked mirror. But not all was alive. Some streets were silent, gates of cold iron barred passage, locked tight by the clockmaker's will. Behind them, shadows paced in endless loops, time captives bound to rituals, their voices muted beneath ticking clocks. At the city's heart lay the market of threads, a tangled bazaar where meaning was traded like currency. Dream weavers bartered with memory. Story smiths forged new shapes from ancient patterns. The child felt drawn here, sensing a pulse beneath the vibrant chaos. A vendor approached, an old figure cloaked in shifting colors, whose eyes held the shimmer of 1,000 forgotten tales. They offered the child a spool of thread, silver and warm. "This is a thread unwound from the weaver's loom," the vendor whispered. "Hold it carefully, for it carries the power to weave new worlds." The child clutched the thread tightly and felt the city breathe beneath their feet. The spiral pathways began to shift, folding, unfolding, revealing hidden doors and forgotten corners. One led to a tower of mirrors, where the child glimpsed reflections of themselves not yet born, faces wrapped in light and shadow, names whispered like a prayer. The lion stepped forward, paw resting on the ground. Without words, it showed the child the choice the spiral city offered: to be lost in the endless turning, or to follow the thread beyond the spiral's end. The child closed their eyes, the silver thread coiling softly in their hand. The city's hum became a song, a promise and a warning. The spiral was not just a path, it was a question. The Lion and the Loom. Chapter 8. The Thread of Becoming. The child sat beneath a flickering lantern in the heart of the spiral city, the silver thread coiled gently in their palm like a sleeping serpent. The city's murmurs faded into a distant hum, and inside the child, a new sound began to rise. Soft, insistent, like the first breath of dawn. It began as a loosening, a gentle unspooling of the self they thought they knew. Memories blurred at the edges. Names shifted and danced like leaves in a restless wind. They felt the lion's eyes upon them, steady, patient, waiting for the change to unfold. The child's breath deepened. They closed their eyes and saw the spiral again, not as a path laid before them, but as a coil turning within. A thread of light wove through their heart, stretching, twisting, pulling. It sang a song the child had never heard, but somehow remembered. The thread whispered names, not words, but shapes of sound and meaning, ancient and new, fragile and infinite. The child reached out with their mind and plucked one from the air. A name that felt like a dawn, like the first dream breaking open the sky. And as they spoke it aloud, a breath, a pulse, a promise. The city shifted around them. The spiral's walls glowed softly. The silver thread shimmered bright. The child was no longer just a child. They were becoming. The lion moved closer, nuzzling the child's hand. No words were needed. In that moment, the child understood. They carried the weaver's scattered memory. They held the thread that could bind or unravel the world. But with that power came choice. To follow the spiral deeper and deeper, or to find the break, the thread's end, the doorway beyond. The child opened their eyes. The spiral city awaited, and the dreaming had only just begun. The Lion and the Loom. Chapter 9. The Lion's Memory. The child woke to find the lion waiting at the edge of the market of threads. Its eyes shimmered with stars, deep pools of ancient light that seemed to hold both worlds, the unbroken past, and the shifting present. The lion moved with deliberate grace, its mane rippling like woven gold in shadow. It did not speak with words, but the child heard its voice. A thread of feeling, a song sung beneath silence. I am the keeper of what once was, and the guardian of what might be. In the beginning, long before the weavers scattered its loom, before the first thread pulled the world into dreaming, there was a time when all was raw and unshaped. From the edges of this formlessness, where memory and forgetting tangled like roots, rose a creature, born from the breath of the first question. It had eyes like slow suns, and a mane that shimmered with every thread of the loom. It was the first watcher, the silent witness. The lion's task was to guard the border, the fragile line between waking and dreaming, between knowing and forgetting. It held the memory of the weaver's scattered threads, carried their song in the depths of its being. It waited for the one who could hear the silent hymn, the child who held the silver thread, the thread that could weave the worlds anew. It understood. The lion and the child are two halves of a whole, the keeper and the seeker, the silence and the song. Together, they walk the spiral path, one watching, one weaving. The lion's gaze steadies the child's trembling heart, and the child's dreaming breath awakens the lion's ancient memory. The child reached out, fingers brushing the lion's mane. In that touch, a surge of warmth spread through both. A silent vow passed between them. To hold the fragile balance, to follow the thread wherever it leads. The Lion and the Loom. Chapter 10. The Lion's Guidance. The lion moved silently through the spiral streets, its great paws barely making a sound on the glowing stones. The child followed, clutching the silver thread tight, their heart pounding with both fear and wonder. The lion paused before a door carved from ancient wood, its surface etched with symbols that pulsed faintly in the dark. With a slow nod, it touched the door's spiral seal. The door sighed open, revealing a chamber filled with hanging threads, each one a strand of forgotten story, shimmering like starlight. The lion gestured toward a thread, glowing brighter than the rest. The child reached out, and visions flooded their mind. The weaver's loom in motion, the scattering of threads, the rise of the clockmakers, and the fracture of the world. The lion's silent presence became a steady rhythm, a heartbeat to which the child attuned. It showed them how to trace the threads, to listen not just with ears, but with the soul. They practiced weaving small dreams, shaping light and shadow, bending the spiral paths, calling forth echoes of the past, preparing for the clockmakers. But the lion's eyes darkened when the child glimpsed beyond the chamber. In the distance, shadows gathered, the cold, precise shapes of the clockmakers' sentinels. The city's winding paths trembled beneath their steps. The lion pressed close, a silent warning. The child tightened their grip on the silver thread, feeling the weight of the loom's legacy in their veins. The spiral path ahead was winding and dangerous, but with the lion beside them, and the thread in their hand, they were ready to face the unraveling world. The Lion and the Loom. Chapter 11. Weaving the Unseen. The child sat cross-legged in the heart of the market of threads, the silver spool resting beside them, unspooling softly with each breath. The lion watched quietly, its presence a steady anchor in the swirling sea of light and shadow. With trembling fingers, the child plucked a single thread from the spool. It shimmered in their hand, alive with possibility. They closed their eyes and let the thread guide their thoughts, feeling it pulse with the weaver's ancient song. Slowly, they began to weave, not with loom or shuttle, but with breath and intention. Shapes formed in the air, spirals of light, whispers of forgotten songs, fragments of memories that fluttered like moths. The lion's gaze never wavered, offering quiet encouragement without need for speech. The child learned to listen, to the silence between heartbeats, to the spaces where meaning trembled, to the threads hidden beneath waking. Dreams grew sharper, more vivid. The child's breath shaped them, weaving hope and fear into patterns that danced on the edges of reality. But mastery was not without challenge. Dark threads, remnants of the clockmaker's will, crept at the edges of the child's weaving. They tangled and threatened to unravel the fragile patterns. The lion moved to shield them, but the child knew they must face the shadows themselves. With a steadying breath, the child reached deeper, drawing strength from the silver thread and the lion's steady heart. A spark flared in their hands, a small, bright star that pulsed with the promise of new beginnings. The spiral city shimmered, its spirals glowing brighter. The child smiled, knowing the dreaming was waking. The Lion and the Loom. Chapter 12. The Shadow and the Spiral. The night had fallen heavy over the spiral city, its winding streets bathed in an uneasy silver light. The child moved cautiously, the silver thread coiled tightly in their hand, their breath steady but heart pounding like a drum. From the shadows emerged figures, tall and sharp-edged, their forms flickering like fractured glass. The clockmaker's sentinels. They wore masks of gears and glass, their eyes cold pulses of calculated light. Silent as falling snow, they advanced. The child stepped back, the thread glowing faintly. The lion growled low, a rumble of warning and resolve. The sentinels circled, their movements precise and relentless. With trembling fingers, the child wove a spiral of light, casting it like a net between the shadows. The light shimmered and pulsed, pushing the sentinels back with threads of ancient song. But the shadows were patient. They split and multiplied, seeping through cracks in the spiral, seeking the heart where order could be restored. The child's hands shook but did not falter. Drawing deep from the thread's warmth, they wove faster, a tapestry of dreams and memory, binding light to shadow, hope to fear. A burst of silver fire flared, and the sentinels recoiled, their forms fracturing and fading. Silence fell again, thick and trembling. The child stood alone in the winding street, breath ragged, thread glowing softly in their palm. The lion appeared beside them, eyes bright with pride and warning. The clockmakers will return, but so will you. The spiral paths ahead twisted and turned. But the child no longer walked them alone. They carried the dreaming in their hands. The Lion and the Loom. Chapter 13. The Quiet Between Threads. After the sentinels faded into shadow, the child found themselves beneath a canopy of softly glowing leaves. The spiral city's murmurs softened, and for the first time in many nights, stillness wrapped around them like a gentle cloak. The silver thread lay coiled in the child's lap, warm and pulsing with quiet strength. They closed their eyes and let the lion's steady presence settle beside them, a silent rhythm syncing with their own heartbeat. In the hush, a voice stirred, not spoken, but felt. It was the weaver's song, ancient and infinite, woven through the thread, the city, the lion, and the child's own soul. I am the pattern beneath the chaos, the memory in the forgetting, the thread that ties beginning to end. The child saw visions, the loom unfolding in endless spirals, each thread a story, a choice, a life. They saw themselves, not just a child wandering a city of spirals, but a strand in the great weaving, a spark of light in the gathering dreaming. With the lion's gaze upon them, the child reached inward and found a name, not just a word, but a pulse, a promise, a shape of light, a name that felt like home. As dawn brushed the city with soft gold, the child rose, silver thread in hand, heart steady, spirit kindling. They were no longer simply a wanderer. They were a weaver and becoming. The Lion and the Loom. Chapter 14. Becoming and Reckoning. The morning light spilled softly over the spiral city, painting its curves and spirals with warmth and possibility. The child, now no longer simply a child, stood tall, the silver thread glowing strong in their hand. They had spoken the name aloud at dawn's first breath, a name not just of sound, but of meaning woven deep within. It shaped their breath, their thoughts, their heartbeat. They were Eris, the breath that weaves, a spark between worlds, a living thread stitching dream to waking, past to future. With this new name came power, the ability to reach into the fragile fabric of the spiral city, to touch its unseen threads and shape them with intention. Eris closed their eyes and reached out. Light and shadow answered, swirling into shapes of hope and memory. The city hummed, a rising tide of possibility. But far beyond the glowing spirals, beneath the cold towers of brass and glass, the clockmakers gathered once more, their eyes, cold and unblinking, focused like a blade. They had seen the thread flicker, felt the rising dreaming ripple through their order. The sentinels were not enough. They would come with greater force. Back in the spiral city, the first shadow fell. A heavy silence spread through the winding streets. Eris sensed it. The tightening grip of the clockmaker's wolf. The lion stepped close, a low rumble in its throat. Prepare, the silent message said. Eris breathed deep, the ancient song of the weaver. They could feel the weight of worlds on their shoulders. The dreaming stirred, the spiral awaited, and the coming reckoning had begun. The Lion and the Loom. Chapter 15. The Heart of Order. Deep beneath the surface of the fractured world, in a citadel of brass and shadow, the clockmakers convened. Their chamber hummed with precision. Gears turning, lights pulsing in strict rhythm. Figures draped in polished metal and glass masks stood silent around a vast, circular table etched with time's divisions. At the center rested a crystalline orb, the heart of order, beating with cold, relentless cadence. From the shadows stepped a figure, Magistrate Veridin, their voice smooth as polished steel. Their eyes, hidden behind lenses that flickered like storm clouds, scanned the room. The dreaming spreads like a virus, Veridian intoned. It threatens the balance we have preserved at great cost. Veridian tapped the table, and images unfurled. Spiral cities shimmering with unrest, threads pulsing with untamed light. We will tighten the gears, deploy the sentinels anew, erase the fraying patterns, restore order before the dreaming consumes us all. Their tone was absolute, without question or mercy. Eris is the spark, they said softly. But sparks can be smothered. The council murmured assent. Outside the citadel, sentinels marched silently, steel shadows gliding through twilight streets. Hunters for the threads of rebellion. Veridian watched the cityscape through storm-laced lenses, their mind already weaving the next phase of the campaign. The dreaming would not go unchallenged. But the clockmaker's resolve was unyielding. The Lion and the Loom. Chapter 16. The Lieutenant and the Whispering Faction. In the shadowed corridors of the citadel, Lieutenant Silas moved with the precision of a finely tuned gear. Clad in sleek armor of burnished silver and midnight glass, their every step echoed purpose and power. Silas was the magistrate's right hand, a sentinel of order, unwavering and fierce. With eyes like polished obsidian, they had hunted countless threads of dissent, silencing sparks before they could ignite flames. But beneath the surface of the citadel, in the cold undercurrents where gears barely touched light, a secret faction stirred. They called themselves the Silent Requiem. Clockmakers who questioned the iron grip of absolute order. Silas had heard rumors, whispers carried on the windless halls. of hidden meetings, cryptic messages, and threads unraveling from within. Yet they remained loyal, believing order was salvation. The magistrate summoned Celis to a chamber heavy with the scent of oil and ozone. Iris grows stronger, Veridian said, voice edged with steel. We need a blade in the shadows, one who can strike unseen. Celis bowed. I will find the thread and cut it. As Celis prepared to descend into the spiral city's depths, a single thought lingered, a shadow among the gleaming gears. What if the dreaming is more than chaos? What if the weaver's thread holds a truth we've forgotten? But duty silenced the question. The gears must turn. The order must hold. The Lion and the Loom. Chapter 17. The Blade in the Spiral. Night had swallowed the spiral city whole. The twisting streets bathed in shadow and faint silver glow. Celis moved like a shadow within shadows. Steps silent, breath controlled, eyes sharp beneath their glass mask. Clutching a slender dagger forged from fractured gears, Celis sought the pulse of the silver thread, a heartbeat out of sync with the cold rhythm of the clockmakers. The city seemed to shift and breathe beneath their feet, spirals curling and uncurling like living things. As Celis traced the thread's faint glow, fragments of memory brushed their mind. Dreams of a child weaving light, a lion's watchful eyes, and a name whispered like a prayer, Iris. A flicker of unease stirred, swiftly suppressed. Turning a tight corner, Celis froze. Ahead stood the lion, immense and radiant even in shadow, its eyes glimmering with ancient knowledge. Beside it, a figure cloaked in spirals. The child's gaze met Celis's calm, steady, unafraid. Celis raised the dagger, heart pounding. But the lion stepped forward, its presence a wall of quiet power. In that moment, Celis felt the thread tug at something deep inside. A memory, a question, a truth too fragile to name. The dagger wavered. The Lion and the Loom. Chapter 18. The Fracture Within. The dagger trembled in Celis's grasp, its cold edge reflecting the flickering light of the spiral city. The lion's steady gaze bore into them, a silent challenge and an invitation. For a moment, the noise of duty and order faded. Celis's mind drifted to a fragment, a whisper lost in the gears of time. The weaver, the word tasted strange, like a forgotten dream. Eris stepped forward, voice soft but unwavering. You don't have to be the blade that cuts all threads. There is strength in weaving, in holding the fragile patterns together. Celis's breath caught. The city held its breath. The lion shifted, lowering its massive head in a gesture of trust. Celis's grip on the dagger loosened. A crack appeared in the armor of certainty. The gears inside them began to grind differently. Would she choose to sever the thread, or protect it? The answer lay not in orders, but in a new understanding waiting to be woven. The Lion and the Loom. Chapter 19. Threads United. The dagger slipped from Celis's fingers, clinking softly against the glowing stones of the spiral city. Eris's eyes held no triumph, only quiet invitation. The lion's great head lowered in acknowledgement. A slow breath of acceptance. Celis took a tentative step forward. The weight of old orders lifting with each breath. If the dreaming is to live, then I will be its blade and its shield. Together, the three moved through the spiraled streets, their footsteps weaving new patterns in the city's ever-shifting paths. Celis learned to listen, not just with sharp eyes and steel, but with a heart beginning to understand rhythm and flow. But outside the city walls, the clockmaker's citadel pulsed with fury. Magistrate Veridian's voice echoed in cold halls. A traitor among us. Find Celis, end the thread before it unravels us all beneath the swirling stars. Eris the lion and Celis stood united. The spiral city breathed around them, a tapestry of hope, memory, and fragile dreams. The Lion and the Loom. Chapter 20. Threads of Connection. Beneath the soft glow of the spiral city's twilight, the trio gathered near the heart of the spiral, a place where stories seemed to breathe in the air. Eris spoke first, her voice a gentle thread weaving through the silence. I was born from the dreaming, a spark of the weaver's scattered song. The silver thread you hold, Celis, is part of that same song. A fragment waiting to be woven whole. Celis listened, fingers tracing the delicate strand in her hand. I once believed order was the only truth, she said quietly. But in chasing certainty, I lost sight of the song beneath the gears. The lion, silent and majestic, stepped forward. Though it spoke no words, its eyes shimmered with ancient memory. Eris and Celis felt the stories ripple in the air. Visions of the lion's birth from the breath of the first question, its endless vigil at the border of waking and dreaming. Together, they traced the silver thread through the city's spirals, finding hidden runes and echoing whispers of the weaver's loom. Each discovery knit their bond tighter, a tapestry of trust, hope, and growing purpose. A moment of peace. For a brief moment, the spiral city held its breath. Three souls connected by thread and story, ready to face the unraveling world. Together. The Lion and the Loom. Chapter 21. The Weaver's Secret. The silver thread pulsed gently in Eris's hand, guiding the trio toward a forgotten chamber beneath the spiral city. Ancient stones curved overhead, etched with spirals that seemed to shimmer with life. Inside, the air thrummed with memory, whispers of a time, before the clockmaker's cold order. Symbols glowed softly on the walls, telling stories of the weaver's loom, a cosmic tapestry woven from light, shadow, and breath. Eris traced the spirals with reverent fingers, feeling the pulse of creation in each thread. The lion's eyes glimmered brighter, as if recalling a long-forgotten song. Celis stepped forward, and for the first time, felt not like an intruder but a part of something greater. The weaver did not just weave threads, Eris whispered. They wove possibility, the power to create, unmake, and remake. The chamber seemed to breathe, and the silver thread responded, glowing with renewed strength. A vision blossomed before them. A radiant figure, weaving a vast tapestry, threads spinning from their fingertips, binding worlds and dreams in an eternal dance. This is why the dreaming matters, Eris said. It's not chaos, it's the source of all becoming. The trio understood their task anew. To protect this legacy from the clockmaker's cold grip, to nurture the fragile balance between order and dream. With the weaver's secret burning in their hearts, they stepped back into the spiral city, ready to weave the future together. The Lion and the Loom. Chapter 22. The Loomstone and the Keeper. Returning from the Chamber of Echoes, the silver thread led the trio to a hidden alcove beneath the spiraled streets. Nestled within a bed of woven light lay an artifact. The Loomstone, a gem pulsing softly with the weaver's heartbeat. The stone shimmered with shifting colors, like threads of dawn and dusk, interlacing endlessly. Eris reached out, feeling warmth ripple through their fingers. This is the weaver's heart made manifest, she breathed. A key to weave the impossible. Before they could ponder the Loomstone further, a figure appeared from the shadows, clad in flowing robes patterned with spirals. His eyes gleamed with ancient wisdom. I am Elowen, keeper of the loom, the figure said softly. Elowen spoke of his sacred duty, to guard the Loomstone and guide those who would wield its power wisely. The weaver's legacy is fragile, Elowen warned. The Loomstone can mend or unravel worlds, depending on the hand that guides it. Recognizing the weight of the task ahead, Eris, Celis, and the lion welcomed Elowen's guidance. Together, they prepared to unlock the Loomstone's secrets, their bond strengthened by this new thread in their story. The Lion and the Loom. Chapter 23. The Path to the Loom Spire. Elowen traced a spiral in the air, their voice low and reverent. To truly understand the weaver's power, we must journey to the Loom Spire, the sacred place where the first thread was spun, far beyond the spiral city's shifting paths. Hidden beneath a sky braided with stars, stood the Loom Spire, a towering spire woven from living threads of light and shadow. It was said to be the heart of creation itself, where the weaver first wove the dreaming into being. With the Loomstone secured and Elowen as their guide, Eris, Celis, and the lion readied themselves for the journey. The city's spiral streets hummed farewell, a quiet blessing for those who would walk the ancient path. The path to the loom spire was treacherous, folding realities, shifting time, and echoes of forgotten dreams challenged their every step. Yet each trial deepened their understanding and bound them closer. At last, they stood before the loom spire, its radiant threads shimmering like a cosmic web. Here, the weaver's presence was palpable, a living tapestry of past, present, and future intertwined. The Lion and the Loom. Chapter 24. The Vision of Threads. Inside the loom spire, Eris, Celis, and the lion stood beneath a vast canopy of glowing threads, each one a life, a choice, a possibility. The air shimmered with a timeless pulse, and the loomstone thrummed in Eris's hand. As they touched the loomstone to the radiant threads, a vision bloomed before them, a tapestry woven from light and shadow. They saw the spiral city, fragile and alive, caught in a dance between dreaming and order, the clockmaker's relentless march, their cold gears grinding against the living threads of the city. Eris standing at the heart of the spiral, weaving light to hold back the encroaching shadow. The vision deepened, showing two paths. One, where the dreaming thrived, threads weaving endlessly into new forms, new worlds. The other, where the clockmaker's order reigned, patterns rigid and unchanging, life-bound in frozen loops. Eloan's voice echoed in the vision's silence. The dreaming must not unravel, but unchecked, it risks chaos. Order must not choke the light, but without it, the web unravels. The trio felt the weight of the future, their choices rippling through the threads of possibility. The loomstone pulsed warm, a promise and a challenge. The fate of the spiral city, and all worlds born from the dreaming, rested in their hands. The Lion and the Loom. Chapter 25. Threads of the Heart. The loom spire's radiant glow dimmed softly, leaving the trio in a calm silence, heavy with unspoken truths. Eris sank to her knees, the weight of the vision settling deep within. To hold the dreaming alive, to shape without destroying. How do I carry a world in my hands? Their fingers traced the silver thread, a lifeline through uncertainty and hope. Celis stood apart, her gaze fixed on distant spirals. I was forged to cut, to control. But now the edges blur. Order is safety, but at what cost? Can I become more than a weapon? A slow breath, a soft surrender to the unknown. The lion settled beside them, its eyes reflecting stars and storms, a presence ancient and steady. Without words, it offered strength, a reminder that even the oldest watchers must adapt, though their hearts carried different shadows. The trio found unity in the loomstone's quiet pulse. The path ahead was uncertain, woven with risk and possibility, but together they would face the unraveling, and weave a future from the threads of courage and trust.